part of a climate mitigation and climate change strategy. There's a lot of people who have bicycles that are hybrid, that they don't have to necessarily pedal. And I've been told maybe I should get one. I don't know how I should take that. But if this trail was finished through up to Ladysmith, I very well might use it to go and do some of the errands that I like to do up there. I think that we also want together CVRD Parks and Rec things as some area directors, so I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I'm just saying that's how I see it, as a very positive thing for the region, not just recreationally, and also if you think about it for affordability. I'm surprised how many people I see on the trail from my house, where it almost ends, into Chemainus, because I didn't see that many people when I used to walk on the road. People with their children, people with their dogs, a lot more people are walking, so I think it's a health thing and probably affordability. You don't necessarily need to run your car so much if you have a way to get through that network. So I very much support it.
Director Dorey.
Yes, I concur with Director Marsh. In fact, when we get the trail through Saltaire, there'll be a lot of people getting electric bikes, because quite often you have a two-car family when you live in Saltaire, and you'd be able to drop one car if you're just going to Ladysmith or Chemainus to get a little groceries and whatever. I think it'd be really, really a good thing. Now, I have some concerns. I'm wondering whether the license agreement is the same as it was before, or has it been upgraded, changed, or whatever. One concern I had was when we come to a crossing on the island corridor, the expenses seem to be like you were running a super highway railway or something like that, a fast train. The amount of money that you had to spend to upgrade the crossing was out of proportion to what the rail service is or would be. So a question for Mr. Farquhar, whether there's been any changes and whether the crossing thing can be took us a different way moving forward, seeing as we're not building a train line there right now.
Mr. Farquhar.
Madam Chair, to the first question, this is a much better and long-term secured license arrangement with ICF, which gives 25 years plus the ability to renew for a further 25. So we're talking upwards of 50 years. So I think in terms of the investments being made by our community in terms of the rail with trail and rail to trail, it's much more secure than what we've had up to date. With respect to actual crossings, that is something that staff continues to negotiate with Island Corridor Foundation and Southern Rail in terms of the costs associated with such crossings, because we share those concerns in terms of the upfront costs, and if there's ways we can find a means to achieve something a little bit cheaper or a little bit different that keeps costs in relative control relative to the overall project costs, that's what we continue to pursue with them. But you know, we'll have to cross that track when we get to it.
Thank you. I have Director Nicholson, Lefebvre, and Jackson.
I just want to clarify my comments. I certainly support trails. I'm a big proponent of trails. My issue is that we often talk about priorities, but don't at the same time have a serious discussion about how the resourcing is going to happen for those priorities and what the implications are for things that should fall off the table if you shift things. We talk a lot about the need to be efficient with our taxpayers' money, and I think it's really important to have those resourcing issues at the same time as you have the discussions about priorities. So today isn't the time to have a discussion about how important trails are. My point was merely that we need to have that discussion if we're going to be responsible about our decision making.
Director Lefebvre.
Thank you. Having attended a number of liaison sessions with the Island Corridor Foundation, one of the things they said was that they're extremely regulated in terms of their the condition of the crossings, and very restricted in what they can do and can't do. So I know they're operating under a lot of restrictions.
Thank you. Director Jackson.
Yes, thank you very much, through you to Mr. Farquhar. If you do eventually come to some agreement with them that's going to be more cost-effective, please let the city of Duncan know. I know that people in Duncan have been requesting a rail crossing in Charles Hoey Park for years, and it's going to cost $80,000 because we can't just put a slab down. They want it to be fenced, even though there's no train. It's absolutely ridiculous. So if you do find success, I would really appreciate it if you would communicate that to the city.
Madam Chair, we will happily share with all our member municipalities whatever successes we have with Island Quarter Foundation and Southern Rail. But yes, they are governed by Transport Canada and other regulations, so it is fairly rigid in terms of their latitude that they can provide, but we continue to dialogue with them on that.
Great, thank you. Okay, it's been duly moved and so. Director Kuhn.
What costs are involved in this?
Mr. Farquhar.
Madam Chair, as noted in the staff report, there's a one-time upfront license fee of $5,000, and then thereafter, every time we would be looking to build a new section of trail within the corridor, we would be subject to a $2,500 file processing fee, and then any direct costs associated with their review of what the planned trail improvements are to cover off their engineering review costs. And then the only other cost is through the taxation. So based on what the regional district through the province is doing now and what our member municipalities are doing in terms of providing tax relief for taxes otherwise payable, the conditions of the trail license agreement are either A, those tax reliefs continue in future years by way of member municipalities and the province, and if not, if taxes become payable, then that would be part of the annual cost to keep the license agreement going.
Thank you. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you very much. Moving on to unfinished business.
Unfinished business, a verbal update from the CAO regarding the Parks and Trails volunteer policy.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The intent of this report is just to brief the board, the committee. If you recall at the last committee meeting, staff brought forward a draft volunteer policy for the committee's consideration, and that matter was referred to additional work. The committee felt that there needed to be some effort put into more of a guidelines document, more of a program document around the use of volunteers in CVRD operations as a means to guide some of the philosophy around the use of volunteers and to potentially serve as a recruitment tool for recruiting volunteers. Recognizing at the same time that we do require a policy that was presented to the committee with respect to the mechanics of managing our volunteers and the liabilities for both our volunteers and for the CVRD. I just wanted to make the committee aware that if you recall earlier on in the term, there was an initiative to review a number of our commissions. We started with our parks commissions. They are the most prolific commissions that we have, the most numerous commissions that we have. And we had done some work on revising the Parks Commission bylaw to make it more consistent throughout the regional district. That effort was put on hold pending the development of a volunteer policy. The committee didn't feel comfortable moving forward with changes to the commission until the volunteer policy was developed. So staff worked on that. We are now in a position of having to do some further work on the volunteer program. I just wanted to let the committee know that currently we are recruiting for a volunteer coordinator position that was approved in the last budget. It is our intent that this work around developing our volunteer program is going to be assigned to that individual when they are recruited. And so very likely that will happen over the summer and that work will progress into the fall. So I just wanted to close the loop on this outstanding item that very likely the committee is not going to see the full volunteer program as you want delivered until we've been able to recruit that position and they've been able to spend some time. There's going to be a fair bit of work involved in this, doing some best practice research, developing those documents. At the same time, you have deferred the commission work, and you have extended the appointments of your park commissions till the end of the year. So I'm just suggesting there's a bit of a ripple effect here in these various initiatives, and I just wanted to make the committee aware of that. I know that there's people that are looking at the completion of that commission review and our volunteer work, and I just wanted to make the committee aware of when we're going to be able to deliver that work back to the committee.
Questions? We have Director Marsh and Director Dory.
This isn't really a question, and I know it's going to be a stretch, but I just wanted to, it sort of involves volunteers, but they're not really volunteering for the CVRD as a government. They're volunteering for the search for a man who lives in our community that's missing. And what I wanted to do was acknowledge Mr. Carruthers and his staff for the support they've shown in bringing out recycling and garbage bins. Mr. Farquhar for saying that no matter what, the CVRD will do their best to accommodate the family who understandably continues to search, and particularly also for Director Nicholson, who has used her role to help to support the family. And I just thought it, you know, I was amazed because I stopped out there on the weekend at the number of volunteers in the region and the people that came from, I don't know if any of you know Russell from Powell River, the councillor. There he was across the parking lot. So many people from across the region. So I was very touched, and when I was there, the family and friends expressed incredible, almost incredulity and appreciation for the CVRD staff and for Director Nicholson.
Very nice. Thank you. And thanks to all the staff and CVRD that have come forward. It's a tragedy in our community, and hopefully he'll be found. Director Dory.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question's about the volunteer coordinator. Will the person be like a team captain, like a person that gets out there and leads and helps coordinate the projects? Or will this be a person who just basically handles the paper shuffling in the office, making sure that all of the forms are in order and that all of the protocol has been followed? What kind of a staff person are we looking at here?
Mr. Carruthers, and can we tell that he was a high school teacher?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll let Mr. Farquhar add to anything
Yeah.
that I may have missed. My expectation is that this function would, or this position would serve both functions. There may be major projects, there may be activities out on the ground that this staff member would be involved in helping to coordinate on the ground. At the same time, they'll be involved in the background work, developing policy, making sure that all our paperwork is looked after. I can't stress enough, I think sometimes the use of volunteers is not given the due consideration. As an employer, whether we have staff or whether we have volunteers working on our premises, we have a responsibility to look out for them. And it's not just as simple as saying they're volunteers and let them go about their work. We have an added responsibility to ensure that the volunteers that are working with us are trained, that they understand what's expected of them. The last thing I think this board, or certainly our staff, want to see is a volunteer who's come to work for us and goes home injured, or even worse. And so we have to treat our volunteers as we treat our staff. They're important resources for the regional district, and we have to treat them accordingly. And as we have an entire human resources department that looks after our staff and our well-being and our health and safety programs, we have to apply that same rigor to our volunteers, and we haven't in the past. And I think we've been somewhat flippant as an organization in how we've utilized our volunteers. So it's a very, very important function, and certainly given the board's desire to see increased use of volunteers and increased use of our local resources, we need to ensure that they're supported. So long answer to a short answer, yes, they'll fill both functions. But if Mr. Farquhar is happy with that.
Thank you. Director Nicholson.
Thank you. The commission members for the parks are really important volunteers. And I think at this point, I'm confident that we can continue to work through on the volunteer front, and I would like to move that we bring forward the commission issue again and have it, resolve it before, during this term. I think it would provide clarity, welcome clarity for the commission members.
Director Acton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Mr. Carruthers bringing this forward today, and I agree that
Just a second.
I don't believe,
Oh, okay, hold it.
okay.
Point of
Want me to
order.
stop?
So your motion is to look into the commissions? Bring the,
Bring the commissions back, the Parks Commission's bylaw back.
okay, are we not looking, okay. Is there a seconder for that motion? It's been moved and seconded to bring back the bylaw for the commissions. Any discussion? Director Acton.
Thank you. I appreciate that Mr. Carruthers brought this forward altogether, and I do not support the motion as of yet. I don't have a good enough explanation from Director Nicholson. I do value her opinion, but I do think that they are all very connected, and a great idea to have the new volunteer person take that on and connect them all and have it all presented at once. So I would prefer it that way. It has come forward many times separately, and we have not been able to agree, because I think it proves that they all need to come together.
Thank you, Director Morrison, and then Director Stone.
Thank you. I believe that the path forward as explained by our CAO is the correct one. I think that this, just the exercise that we went through in considering the policy that was brought to us has made it clear, at least to me, that this needs to be done right, and I'd like to see it done right the first time. And I think that there's timing and capacity issues that all of us should think about, and I think that to bring it forward as a priority to be completed within this term is going to be a challenge, and will cause other things that have been deemed priorities by this board and this committee to not be done. I think that we've given this to staff to work with, and we should let them prepare the information and do the research and report back to us in a time that is going to produce the best result and not fit to a schedule. I think we have capacity issues. We've got a lot on our plate, and I won't be supporting this resolution. Thank you.
Director Stone.
I was just going to bring up the point of capacity. I feel like with our things already on our plate, that there seems to be an extremely heavy workload. I hear comments around the table on other issues that we're challenged to do the job we think we should be doing because we don't have the available resources. So, you know, I just would probably concur with Director Morrison's comment.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. Director Nicholson.
I just think we should be perfectly clear about what the commission bylaw was intended to do. It was to make it consistent among all the parks commissions, how they're formed and what work they do, because many of them are very out of date, and I think it would be useful to do that as soon as possible. It just seems to me to be somewhat unconnected to the volunteer policy.
Okay, and now I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Motion has been defeated. Moving on now to any new business.
No new business?
Question period. Questions shall be addressed to the chair and must be truly questions and not statements of opinions. Questioners are not permitted to make a speech. Good morning.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Can I ask what time the meeting started today?
11.
Oh, okay. So did you not have your volunteer? I apologize, I was a few minutes late. Or delegation about the...
The delegation could not come. They are very busy with the flooding in the province, so they were all called out.
Okay, thank you.
They will be back, though.
Awesome, thank you. I appreciated Mr. Carruthers' update on the volunteer program. The Electoral Area Services Committee saw a video last week, I believe, about volunteers working within an electoral area. And I was very pleased to see Mr. Carruthers talk about responsibilities for the volunteers and for the staff. But I couldn't help notice that these volunteers, some of them were working at the roadside without safety vests. And I understand that there is safety equipment available for the volunteers, is there not, provided by the CVRD?
So are you talking about the road in Cowichan Bay?
Yes, I am.
Most of them, I think, they didn't all have Visi vests, but they weren't exactly they weren't working with the parks.
No, but they were volunteers with the working on a CVRD project
They
to
were
clean up?
volunteers with the Cowichan Bay Improvement Association.
Okay, and is that, can they not wear safety vests there too?
They
Is
could.
that
That's a good thing to
equally-
bring up. I will, yeah,
equally as
safety first
important?
is my
Yeah.
motto. So yes, I appreciate that. And that was the first time that I was involved, but I wasn't involved directly on the worker end of it. I was involved in the administration, but that, I will definitely bring that forward, and that is a good, important lesson. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And that is one of the things that when we do, as parks, when I have volunteers, it comes with a kit. We have all our vests, we have all the pickers, we have everything, and the equipment, that comes in a container. So that's what we have done in the past. This was kind of an anomaly, and I will definitely speak to that to the Cowichan Bay Improvement Association.
Great, thank you. And if you can indulge me just for half a second here, I'd like to say thank you to Mr. Farquhar and the Parks and Trails staff that recently updated the stairs in our neighborhood.
Nice.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. We appreciate, thanks. Okay, so moving on, we're moving into closed session, and it is land disposition.
Madam Chair, a motion to go into close to deal with the closed session minutes of March 28th, Sport Tourism Grant Subcommittee appointments, and a closed session new business item, land disposition.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Give a few minutes to close the door, and we'll come back.